Let's start with this, the Big 12 standings, just right there smack on your screen. BYU, they won again, and they were comfortable. Iowa State, and then you have K-State after their down-to-the-wire win against Kansas, but they found a way to get it done. Colorado, man, they got a heartbeat. And a note from Dion about this in just a minute. Cincinnati, and then TCU with that dramatic win against Tech. A gut-wrenching loss for Tech and Joey McGuire. And then you have West Virginia, Arizona State, Baylor, Houston, and all the way down Oklahoma State, 0-5. Utah, 1-4. Arizona, 1-4. Kansas, 1-4. UCF, these are teams, not UCF as much at the top, but a lot of those teams, Paul, we thought would be in the mix to win or play for the Big 12 title.
You know, this is it's quite the thing where you look at this and you say this is like it's upside down from where we thought it would be almost completely. When you look at outside of Iowa State, who I thought would be in the middle, and Kansas State, who I thought would be about where they are, if not higher, but you know, Oklahoma State, Kansas, UCF, Utah, all at the bottom. Arizona at the bottom. We thought that was it. And then everything else, it's like it goes in reverse order of what we thought it would be all the way around. So, yeah, it's fantastic for the league to have such fluidity and be a week-to-week league where you don't know what's going to happen. But, you know, when you look at some of the other things going on, particularly with UCF, Kansas, and Oklahoma State, I don't know if they could have written worse seasons for themselves.
Yeah, we saw Oklahoma State up personal. We'll get to that game in a moment, with Baylor winning back-to-back games to get to 4-4.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people having fun at the predictions at the beginning of the season and where they actually are now. We still have a month left to play out. Clearly, there's going to be teams like Utah and Oklahoma State that are going to be on the total opposite of where they started out, and they're going to remain there. There's just not much hope that that's going to turn around, and they're certainly not going to find themselves back near the top. But I think the kind of puzzling thing to me, guys, is, yeah, like, let's dunk on the media for being wrong, like KU, that was way off, and Oklahoma State, that was way off. But my thought when I've seen this, because now it's become sort of like a trend where anybody who talks about the Big 12 has posted the standings in like the last 4 days, and they're like, see? Including us.
Yep.
But were we not talking about how this is the most unpredictable league where any week everybody can beat everybody, and there's no, like, we were doing preseason predictions like, I don't freaking know, like, it could be this team. So, like, it's a situation where, yeah, the media got it wrong, but if you look at it based on the way we talked about the league, that's kind of what you were expecting, was to be wrong, because you really had no idea what to expect out of a lot of these teams because of the integration of the 4 Pac schools and just the number of questions surrounding a lot of schools like Baylor, or, pick a team. They had a lot of questions. And then, the thing that you can't account for, though, is the schools that you thought had a lot of answers certainly didn't. And that's what's made this look so upside down, particularly Oklahoma State, particularly Kansas, particularly Utah, and then to an extent Arizona as well. So I think there's a little bit of both. I think it's like, yeah, the media was way off. I also think that's kind of what you thought coming in, was that this was going to be the unpredictable, wild league that was going to come down to the wire in most of their games every week, and that's what we've seen. So I think it's good from an entertainment standpoint. I think there's some detriment to it when it comes to a championship standpoint. I think you've got 2, maybe 3 real contenders. Colorado, I don't think is a playoff team at this point, and I think Kansas State's really got their work cut out for them. So I think you're really looking at 2 playoff contenders, and that's the 2 unbeatens. That can change, obviously, but that is also a byproduct of being so close, is that you might knock yourself out of a lot of big situations.
No, it's and you know what? In the next 4 weeks, you said there's 4 weeks. All hell could break loose a couple of times during that 4-week stretch, even before AT&T Stadium hosts the game on December the 7th. So let's look at a couple of stories. UCF making some staff changes. UCF head coach Gus Malzahn has fired defensive coordinator Ted Roof, and also relinquishing play calling duties to Tim Harris Jr.
Well, something's got to give, because they're not good at all right now. They've lost 5 games in a row, and after that TCU game, you thought, oh, man, this is a team that's got some moxie. They've got something. Their defense is as bad as you can imagine. Well, it's not as bad. There's a team that I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute that's got a worse defense than them. But, yeah, have to do it. This is, relinquishing play calling duties is essentially changing your coordinator, right? Okay, and change your defensive coordinator in season. That means next year Gus is on the clock. I don't think it's imminent this year, but next year, Gus is on the clock at UCF. They're in a new league. They're trying to make big moves, and they keep losing games that they're leading or just getting blown out because their defense isn't good. So I'll be interested to see who is the defensive coordinator for UCF next season.
When you are a head coach that is a coordinator, and in this case, Gus Malzahn, known for his offense, play calling, and all of that, to sit there and give that up, that's hard to do. It's hard to admit it, and he has done that. And now Tim Harris will take over the play calling duties because they're kind of stuck in the mud. They had almost took down to the wire win, not this weekend but last. But yeah, they need a spark.
Well, yeah, Addison Williams is going to call defensive plays as they replace Ted Roof, who's obviously had a bad couple of years at Oklahoma. That was a very short stint. That did not work out well, and then turns around, goes to UCF, and that doesn't last long either. So you're going to have a different play caller, obviously, on the defensive side with Addison Williams. And then, Gus on the offensive side, handing the reins to Tim Harris Jr. So you've effectively replaced both your coordinators. And you also have a question mark at quarterback. That's a big question, and a question that's haunted you throughout the year with Tim Rizek coming in, not Tim Rizek, but was Dylan Rizek? Yeah, Dylan Rizek. Tim, I was talking about Tim Harris Jr., but Dylan Rizek coming into the game late for Ja'Curry Brown, who was struggling, and KJ Jefferson was struggling, and the quarterback position as a whole has been a struggle. And then you see Rizek, and they had some UCF fans going like, well, where's this guy been? And so they're questioning everything, and rightfully so. When you're on a big losing streak like they are, they're searching for answers, trying to replace what they can, trying to put guys in positions to win in these last 4 games. But it's been a messy season. It's been an awful season compared to your preseason expectations, where you thought at worst you'd be, sort of middle of the pack, and maybe if things fell the right way with your rushing attack, you'd have a chance to compete for the conference. But the defense has been really bad in some cases, and your offense has been really bad, which you certainly didn't expect to necessarily be the case. So you got to do something, and if you can't chop your own, if your own head's not on the chopping block yet, especially because of your contract, other heads are going to have to roll. So that's what you saw today.
We've discussed it. If you're a head coach and you start firing coordinators, then eventually you look around and you're the only one left that has not moved or been put out to pasture, fired, or maybe demoted. Colorado's they're a bowl team. Dion and Colorado are 6-2. I stayed up as late as I could Saturday night to watch their game. They kind of had it pretty much in hand. Travis Hunter, 132 snaps in that game. This from ESPN's Adam Rittenberg. All of the snaps on defense, all but 3 snaps on offense. 153 yards career high receiving, 100th 100-yard receiving performance. Had knocked away 4 passes and also scored a couple of touchdowns on offense. Shador had a big game too, but Travis Hunter putting up huge numbers. He won't be able to do this in the NFL. And that's saying they won't at times have certain packages for him on one side of the ball or the other. But he and Colorado, they're bowl eligible. A lot of people would have bet a lot of money that they would never get to 6 wins.
Yeah, I know they would have. And with Travis Hunter, when it comes to the NFL, I think they just need to let him do what he can do until they find out what he's deficient at. And if he's good at both, then figure out a way to let him do both. I'm sure they'll probably try him out at defense first. And
one
then
thing
do
about
wide
the
receiver.
NFL, there's a lot fewer snaps. So that's the first thing. But at the same time, that is a step up. I'm not saying I would not bet against him, but you want to make sure he's always not beat up, bumps and bruises. But he had himself a game.
The coach that needs to draft Travis Hunter is the coach that doesn't have – he is this and this is what he is.
Yeah,
that's what they do. But he's an absolutely amazing, fantastic player. I've used this comparison before. I think we're lucky as hell to get to see him and Ohtani at the same time. It's not 2024, it's 1924 of guys playing both ways, doing everything. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think he's an incredible player. I think he's going to have a seat in New York for the Heisman ceremony, and maybe he'll even win it as well. I know that Dylan Gabriel and a couple other guys are going to have a say in that. I do think he's overshadowing a little bit how good of a year Shedeur is having. I think that kind of gets lost, and the hatred for Shedeur and Deion, or the dislike, and also just the love for Travis Hunter. I think that Shedeur's excellence can kind of get lost in all of the fog of that. So I do want to shout out Shedeur, who was really good again on Saturday, and is one of the better quarterbacks in the country. And we talk about the NFL with Travis Hunter. What we need to be talking about with Shedeur, because he might be the first or second quarterback off the board here in about
his
6-7 months.
His name has climbed up the odds when it comes to the Heisman Trophy now. Yeah,
Hunter's obviously the dude, and deservedly so. Had a huge game receiving. I think his bread and butter still being a defensive back at the next level, but I'll be interested to see kind of what the scouts say as far as his offensive prowess goes, and certainly he flexed that on Saturday night and put another stamp on his Heisman resume, and that turned out to be a pretty competitive game. But ultimately, Colorado really controlled that one. I mean, they were fully, in grasp of the wheel. I felt like pretty much the entire game, and that was a nice win over Cincinnati. So yeah, you're now 6-2. You're 4-1 in the league, and you're right there, like the 4th spot in the conference. So you're not expecting Iowa State or Kansas State or BYU to take multiple losses, but if you're Colorado, like there's a non-0% chance that you could find your way to Arlington if you keep winning games. So that was a good win over Cincinnati, a good win for the Heisman campaign, and I think a great win if you're Deion and company, if you're thinking back to all those people at the beginning of the year who were already writing you off and saying this and that, and here you are, and you're sitting pretty, and you've made a bowl game. So that's a big accomplishment, and that's a big step forward for that program.
All right, who are they going to be favored against? Play at Texas Tech.
Favored.
Utah, home.
Favored.
Kansas on the road.
Favored.
Oklahoma State at home.
Favored.
Yeah. And again, it's the Big 12, so this all could be flipped upside down like an upside-down pie or cake. But they got through the hardest part of their schedule. Yes, those are still games that they just can't take for granted.
Okay.
But
I want to throw this out about Travis Hunter. Here's the top 5 picks in the draft where he will probably go, you would say, right?
You mean teams?
Yeah, team. Like he's going in the top 5. Okay.
All right. One of them has to be.
Right now is Carolina is number 1.
Okay.
Does he?
Any more than him, right?
Yeah, but like he's tempting, especially if they decide Bryce Young is going to be the quarterback next year.
Sure.
All right.
Okay. Then it's Tennessee, who's probably going to draft a quarterback.
I mean, goodbye to his career if he goes to Carolina, but yeah.
Yeah. Then New England, who just drafted a quarterback. I don't think he gets past them.
Oh, you talking about Shedeur?
No, I'm talking about
Travis Hunter.
I'm talking about Travis Hunter.
Well,
you're talking about quarterback.
Yeah. So I can reasonably see a scenario where, Shedeur Sanders is the 2nd pick and Travis Hunter is the 3rd.
Yeah, I could see both going top 5 for sure.
Yeah. So
I wouldn't put money on that right this moment, but I could definitely see that. And give me 2 or 3 months, I might put some money on that.
Yeah. Well, I'm telling you, those guys have helped, and other things that have been tightened up by Colorado. The coaching staff, which is questioned about what they were doing, they have won. They are 6 wins now, eligible for a bowl game, and I have some feeling that there's. I think I had them like 10 or so in my preseason, maybe 10 or 11. You could still get to a bowl game if you're 10th or 11th in the Big 12. But I know a lot of people that did not give them a chance in hell, and so good for them. They're now bowl eligible. Now they have bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, last week I brought up the TV ratings, and there was a comment from Sports Media Watch about the fact that Colorado had like the lowest ratings they'd had in however long it had been. Obviously, since Deion had been there, it's like the last year and a half or whatever it was, and I thought about that over the weekend. I am starting to wonder, and I'm not a big like Deion versus the world guy by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm starting to wonder if people are tuning out because they are winning. Mm-hmm. Because the joy was in watching them lose for a lot of outside observers. So now they're like winning regularly, and it's like, oh, well, this is not why I'm tuning in is to watch them win games. I'm tuning in to watch them be a total train wreck. And I wonder if that does take away some of the audience because that's the audience that was there to watch them be bad.
They were initially the numbers last year were the newness of it.
Yeah, sure.
And then when they went off and beat TCU, and then of course went 3-0 or whatever, hammered Nebraska. Then I think people got a little bit worn down with all the publicity, just because there's some that don't like Deion and the glitz and glamour. And so maybe you're right. Maybe there's this, now they're winning. Well, hell, I'm not going to watch them because they're probably going to win type of stuff. I did. I enjoyed it. They played well. and took care of a pretty good team in Cincinnati.
They do suffer, though. That late night window's fun for fans, but I think fortunately Travis Hunter's a big enough star where it doesn't matter. But I do think that there are Heisman voters out on the East Coast that aren't necessarily watching all the Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders performances because it's going on at like 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So I see them, but I don't know how many people writing for the New York Times or whatever are watching those games.
Micah Bernard, Utah, another loss. Man, they were going to run the Big 12. Ask any of the Utah fans, and again, I know that's just social media, but they were, and yes, they've had problems at quarterback, but others have too. Can't answer that and why they've fallen apart. I'm not going to answer that. I know what it is, but I'm not going to answer that. I'm sorry, can't. Sorry, appreciate you. There has to be something going on, and I don't know what it might be, but Josh Furlong with that note after the loss that they had, yet another loss over the weekend with Utah.
Yeah, I watched this clip, and it was really weird that it was right at the very beginning of the interview as well. It was he and his teammate were there in the post-game press conference, and he said word for word what that said. And it was just sort of strange because a guy was asking just about, like, what's off about this team, and he said that right there about, well, we know what it is, but we're not going to say, and respectfully, we're not going to say, and it was just kind of strange, and it wasn't followed up on, and Kyle Whittingham didn't shed any light that I saw or heard, at least in his post-game press conference. He kind of just stuck with the status quo of we need to run the ball better and we need to do this better and that better. So I don't know, but I am curious if it maybe has something, now here we're going to speculate, but is it Isaac Wilson? Is that what they think it is? Is it coaching? Is that what they think it is? Is it the offensive play calling? Because that's, I know, a big issue for Utah fans is the OC. So there's any number of things it could be, especially when you're losing as frequently as they are. But that was one of those that you go, that does not sound good for the culture.
But
what is normally a very good culture.
Which is normally everything's inside those walls, and they just keep chopping at the wood. And that's how I described him, and I think not just me, a lot of people. Kim Coulter, Smokey, you guys missed it. Utah is still waiting for an invite to go to a conference, and it's not who you think, it's the Mountain West Conference. Kim.
Well, we were talking last week about how Utah fans were trying to spin this as best they could, taking these losses. Oh, we had only lost to Pac teams, and then it was TCU doesn't count. That's an old Mountain West team. So now Houston, you lost to Houston.
Yeah.
You lost to Houston.
Yep.
It's
the way Baylor fans felt last year.
Yeah. I mean, hey, Houston's jumped up and beat TCU.
Yep.
Like, they've jumped up. They nearly beat Oklahoma earlier this year, which isn't saying much now. But, but Utah fans, if there's one thing that you would have put your entire savings on, would have been, we're not going to lose to Houston. Well, you lost to Houston. So, they've hit rock bottom. Great win for Willie Fritz and company, but that was a new low, and now it's on BYU's shoulders here in a couple of weeks to keep the pain going, and they seem like they'll be more than ready to do that.
They both have an off week.
Yeah, they have. And so I said a couple weeks.
And November the 9th, they will play in a game that has been much anticipated, even if they were both 1-6 or so. But this is interesting with BYU now. Will be a heavy favorite.
Well, and one other thing on Utah is not only do they have BYU in a couple of weeks, which, hey, great, you got an open week. Well, so do they. Yep. So that's great. That means nothing then. So you'll just play them, and then you'll go play at Colorado, who's in the top 25 now, and then you'll go home you'll go back home, and then you'll play Iowa State. So those are your next 3 ball games. They're all top 25 opponents as of right now, and then at UCF at the end of the year. So this thing's not done sinking as far as this year goes. And now the big picture questions are, they're probably going to finish 500. How far under 500? And how long is for this world is Kyle Whittingham at this point? That's the big question that's buzzing around, is not only the other changes in the speculation, but, like, is the issue that is being referred to, is that, like, all the way at the top of where it's just not where it needs to be? So that's what happens when you lose, man. Everything's up for speculation, but there's definitely something wrong there.
I have a direct message to Josh Furlong, who covers Utah, if he could try to tell me if anything else has been clarified since what Micah Bernard mentioned. Baylor at home, we will get to the top 25, and of course some of the more impressive wins that we saw, and a couple of that we saw too. RG3 on Sawyer Robertson, who had yet another nice game in their win over the weekend against Oklahoma State. RG3 talking about how Sawyer was always at his camp during the summer, loves his style. He is really in a good groove because of what he can do by throwing the ball, passing the ball, and also the ability for him to take off and run, which he scored on a long run. It has opened up the run game, and they just mauled Oklahoma State's defense with the run game. Oklahoma State, they played well as far as stayed in it. Both teams did, and you just wonder who's going to break. Who's going to break? And the Ollie Gordon fumble was a deadly turnover. There's one note about Sawyer Robertson. Let me give you one more. So last week, we had Seth Russell on a week or two ago about the upcoming blackout in the 2013-14 Big 12 teams being honored this weekend. So I made a comment, as did others, about how Sawyer Robertson reminds them, at least his style, kind of the height and the speed and what he does, of Seth Russell. Seth Russell sent me a text today. Hey, man, I heard the call out about the Robertson comparison. Much appreciated, with the heart emoji with Seth Russell.
Yeah, I sat in the end zone and watched this game on Saturday, and I saw a team that I didn't recognize on both sides. I did not recognize that as a Mike Gundy team. That's the worst Mike Gundy team I've ever seen. And I didn't recognize this as Baylor. They ran the ball. They dominated. They played with energy. Now, they tried. Like, it's funny how who I think is becoming their old self still tries to come back out at times where they make mistakes or they don't capitalize. And, look, Brendan Presley for Oklahoma State had an absolutely fantastic game the other day. So sometimes you just can't contain guys that are that good. And I think that was part of it. But Sawyer Robertson is kind of the flashpoint for this beginning. And I was just really impressed with what we saw the other day. Although early on in that game, I was like, man, both these teams are very average. But the difference is Baylor is playing on their way up, and Oklahoma State is just like it's like they fall down a hole, crawl out, walk 10 steps, and there's another hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they're kind of just in an eternal fall at this point. I mean, they're at the bottom of the standings, but there's nowhere left to go, and yet they're still falling. So there's just there's no end in sight as far as the bottom goes. You can tell just the pain and the aggravation that's on the side of the Cowboys right now. And there were some good things. Brendan Presley was a freaking monster. Alan Bowman actually didn't play all that bad, but they didn't run the ball well. Baylor shut down the run game. Ollie Gordon's mouthing off the entire time. I know that's what he does, but he had a couple short TDs, and he had the big, massive fumble at the goal line that turned into a Baylor touchdown. Eventually, it was a little bit of a back and forth that followed right after that, but that was a gimme touchdown that he fumbles away. And you look at a game that was a one-score game late until Baylor finally put the cherry on top, and that was an important play, and that was a big turnover. So there were things like that. In general, the running game just not able to really get going, and so it was a bit of a one-dimensional look for the Pokes, and all those yards didn't amount to enough as far as the winning goes, and certainly not when your defense isn't able to get much in the way of stops either. So, yeah, it was good from the passing perspective, but the rest of it left a lot to be desired, and, that's just Oklahoma State in 2024. They're just on a bad run, and I don't know when it stops, but Saturday they had some opportunities, and they just had too many penalties and too little to stack up against the Bears. So for Baylor, that was a really important win for a multitude of reasons, and right at the top was the fact that they went and finished the game, and they won a home game, and they did both on Saturday, and those were big steps forward for them because they haven't been winning close games, and they haven't been winning games like Oklahoma State at home. So they knocked both of those off the to-do list, and now they get to welcome in TCU after having won a couple games, and they can go over 500. And just almost a month ago, we were talking about them being 2-4 and just not looking good, and here they are, and they've won a couple in a row, and now a big opportunity against a rival they haven't beaten in a really long time with a lot of pageantry. So the more you win, the bigger the games get, and this is a big game for them this Saturday, and that was a big win last Saturday.
All right, we'll get to, Garrett, the blackout and all that at 4 o'clock. We'll do that at 4 o'clock. Also a note about Dave Aranda and the 2013-14 Big 12 championship teams. We'll do that following Ari Temkin, who joins us in about 15 minutes. 8 teams left in college football, unbeaten. Here they are. Army, they had the week off. Miami took care of Florida State.
Don't know what you're talking about.
Pitt, Penn State, Don't they play each other?
Miami and Pitt?
No, Penn State and Pitt. Is that they
No,
don't?
They don't.
Oh, I didn't know if that was one of those
Miami
late.
and Pitt, Miami and Pitt do.
Okay, I thought that was
think.
one of those late year type
Maybe-
games like a
or maybe
Florida
it's Clemson.
State, despite the fact that they're all right.
No.
Also, BYU, we just discussed them. Iowa State, they will not meet unless they played in the Big 12 championship game. Oregon had the huge win against Ohio State, and there they sit. And Indiana won again with the win against Washington. Now, last week it was Fox Big Noon kickoff, and this past weekend it was ESPN College Game Day.
Yeah. Pitt has only played 7 games now this year, which is kind of wild considering how many teams are like maybe a little ahead of them. But they've got SMU this Saturday,
Right.
Which is these
a
are
big game.
huge
It's a huge
ACC
game, yeah.
games, and then 2 weeks from now they have Clemson. So,
Yep.
Not to say that Virginia or Louisville or Boston College couldn't drop up and get them because they're all capable, but
See what you did, Cincinnati? See
Yeah.
what you did?
Yeah.
When you didn't finish the job earlier
Or-
this year, you
or-
allowed this to happen.
Or West Virginia, right? Yeah, both those
Well,
games.
yeah, West Virginia, too.
5 points total between those two teams in the Big 12 back-to-back weeks, yeah.
I didn't want to keep picking on West Virginia. They're a little
They
angry
won.
right now. I know, but there's banners flying, there's
Oh,
billboards,
my God.
and all sorts
Yeah,
of nonsense going on.
All right, the AP Top 25 poll. Couple of notes about this. A&M has moved up into the top 10. What an impressive win away that they had against LSU. Garrett was at that game. BYU is right there at 9. Iowa State tied for 11th. And you have K-State. Look where Boise State is at 15. SMU inside the top 20. Colorado. Now, do you have that audio, Garrett? This is what Dion said following the game and their win against Cincinnati about being ranked nationally.
We ain't thinking about the playoffs right now, right? We go one game at a time. We don't even want to be ranked. Don't rank us, please. We don't like that. We rather be at the back in the dark, just chilling in the cut. We good. We cool. We straight. All right. So don't rank. Don't feel pressure to rank. We good. We're good. I promise you, everybody. We are straight. We're good.
Well, they're now good,
good?
inside the top 25 at number 23, and they have earned that with what they've done, and including the win against Cincinnati.
Imagine being able to lose 34-0 and still hang around the top 25. SEC.
Yeah.
Looking at you, Missouri.
What about
and I know Brady
41
Cook
to
was
10
injured.
too?
What?
And 41-10 too.
Yeah, they had that loss as well. But this one, you're like, oh, well, Brady Cook was banged up. Even though he played in this game, he didn't start from the beginning and finish it out and play the entire game. So there's that little caveat that I'm sure is the only thing the voters were counting on when doing that. But yeah, you have a team that's been blown out. What's that total? Like 71-10 in 2 of their games this year,
Yeah.
and they're still in the top 25.
yeah.
That would not happen if they were in any other conference in America.
No.
So that's when people are like, well, what's this SEC bias in the polls? That's the SEC bias in the polls, is Missouri still hanging around? Because if that was freaking Iowa State, their ass would have been out of there pronto. It wouldn't have mattered if Brock,
It would have
not
been
Brock
out
Purdy,
at
but
41-10 with 1 loss.
yeah,
no.
I mean, I saw that and I could not believe it, and yet I could. And of course, there was the Vanderbilt should still be in the rankings. They lost, and granted, you actually have a bit of an argument there that they played close, but that's the kind of thing where you get the benefit of the doubt, and that's how you end up with 9 teams that never leave the rankings, is because one loses, and then you replace them
There's
with
a bubble.
another, or you let one hang around, Missouri or Vanderbilt, because they still got a lot of votes. They just didn't get enough, but they're right there on the still receiving votes. So that Missouri thing, that is SEC bias, is what that is.
The 2 teams that dropped the most in the coaches poll, LSU fell hard.
Good.
9 spots.
Oh, sorry,
Missouri fell
they
6
should have fell.
spots, and Illinois dropped as well. Missouri dropped 4 spots in the AP, and LSU dropped 8. So the 2 SEC schools did fall quite a bit, at least 2 of them. The furthest, Memphis. Metal, where are you? Man, they're close. They are close. They are inside the coaches poll, and they're 27th in what would be the extended AP poll. All right, there's not many bangers. There's not many bangers. There's a big banger. There's Penn State playing at home against Ohio State in a 3 against a 4.
And Drew Aller's hurt.
And then SMU and Pittsburgh, which you guys brought up, are 18 and 20.
I think that the days of no bangers is a misnomer now. because we've had a couple weeks where it's like, oh, there's not this.
Yep.
Not every week can have an LSU and A&M and a couple other games, or what we had a couple weeks ago, which is like the most fabulous weekend of college football ever. The parity is such, especially throughout the lower parts of it, where you have no idea what's going to happen. And Alabama and Vanderbilt can happen any week. Any week now.
Well,
and it's so
Ohio State almost had their Vanderbilt, but we're just good enough to win the game against Nebraska and Matt Rule. They were close, but not close enough.
Yeah, and I want to go to the rankings again and focus on the fact that you've got Oregon there nearly unanimous at this point at number 1, and Georgia the only one receiving a vote. The only non-Oregon vote is Georgia. They got 1. Who's the homer? Who's out there? Who's that one pesky voter? But Oregon's in full control now. Then Penn State, Ohio State, Miami. Guys, I'm talking about SEC bias because I do think there is that element where I saw this argument about, well, Vanderbilt shouldn't fall, and Missouri didn't have Brady Cook for the whole, like all these excuses. But you look at where the polls started and why the polls at the beginning matter, but you look at where they are after actual games have been played, and you went from like 7 of the top 8 were SEC the first month of the season to 1 of the top 5 currently is SEC. So it's amazing when you don't just say like, let me look at my recruiting rankings and tell you who the best teams are, but you actually go play the games. And if anybody's got bragging rights right now, it's the Big Ten. They're the ones that are sitting there with 1,
4.
3, and 4 in these rankings right now. So that's notable. Also, BYU finally in the top 10. It's been a long wait, it feels like, but finally getting into the top 10, moving up a couple spots, so that's great to see from them. Iowa State dropped in the AP spot.
Yeah, they did because BYU jumped over them, and A&M moved up 4 with a very impressive win.
SEC.
And then also Notre Dame jumped.
Yeah, well, they don't have to do much to just jump right back into anything.
Well, because A&M jumped, Notre Dame beat them earlier, despite the fact Notre Dame lost to Northern Iowa.
But a quality win over Navy, who was undefeated.
Yeah, they beat the hell out of that.
But Iowa State dropped, so, I mean, those two are on this collision course, obviously, and you got K-State in there as well, and now Colorado. So those are your top 4 in the conference, and those are your top 4 in the top 25 right now.
So we've been able to give you kind of a little bit of a summary from the Big 12 weekend, and also now nationally. We're not done nationally, then we break and come back with Ari Temkin. Bryce Petty, former Baylor quarterback, will join us today at 4:25. R.C. Slocum tomorrow, former A&M head coach, will join us tomorrow. Indiana is the first FBS team to start 8-0 at any point in the last 20 years and not trail in the game. They weren't as crisp and clean. Washington, it was still a nice, easy win, but they have never trailed. That's hard to do in case a team gets the opening kickoff and they kick a field goal or whatever. 8-0. Took care of their business, and they have never trailed for 1 second. That's a heck of a stat. A&M with the win against LSU. I thought about the third quarter, mid to third quarter. I thought like LSU just had too much. Their wide receivers all look like Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. And then, my goodness, Mike Elko brings in Marcel Reed to start playing quarterback because Wigman looked a little bit out of whack. Looked like he was always...
Wigman's not good, guys. He's just not good right now, period. He's just not good.
Well, Elko defended him, remember, just about 2 or 3 weeks ago about people making fun of him. But you're right, he didn't play well at all. Looked like he was always like just not right. Marcel Reed comes in, runs basically an option zone read offense, and LSU looked like they'd never seen it before.
Well, Brian Kelly after the game was like, we can't stop a running quarterback. We just can't do it. Can't do it. Which, I mean, he's very candid. I guess we're going to go to that in a second. But here's what I think is wrong.
They're about to play Alabama with Jalen Milroe in 2 weeks, right?
But Connor Wegman needs, for him to be effective, he needs the wide receivers that LSU has, because he's got to be able to throw some guys open a little bit that, can run a little better. A&M's got some really good wide receivers. They don't have a great wide receiver. They don't have an alpha dog. LSU's got Kyron Lacey. They need a Kyron Lacey type for Alan Wigman because he's not a threat to run really on you, especially not run like Marcel Reed. You put Marcel Reed in there, you take a guy out of the secondary, or you take a linebacker out of coverage, and you've got all this stuff that opens up now. So, yeah, I just think that Marcel Reed is the is the best option for the Colin Klein offense.
Well, if they played defense the way they did and they came out like
Yeah,
a
it
bunch of
doesn't matter,
angry
yeah.
dogs, they don't care about the 15-yard penalties. They were looking for some heads, and they got a few of them. I mentioned earlier about the backup quarterbacks the team played with or without. Conundrum made a great point. Indiana did not play with Warwick. Remember, he was out, played with their backup quarterback, and still cruised to a win against Washington.
Yeah, they're incredible. I mean, Kurt Cignetti's done a really good job, and nothing seems to be too big of an issue for them to overcome or, bumps in the road or just that. They hit them and they keep on rolling with a lot of confidence and just a lot of entertaining football. So they've been a great story, and very interested to see where this continues to go now with just a handful of games remaining and being right there in the thick of things at the top of the Big Ten. So that story's far from over. But yeah, Wegman he got sacked 4 times. I mean, he's just not that guy for A&M. Marcel Reed clearly is the dude.
I was wondering, Craig, I don't know about can Marcel Reed, if they need to come back, throw the ball, and the first damn throw he made was a 50-yarder right over the guy's shoulder in a big moment of that game.
Yeah, and it's not like Wegman's out there throwing for 300 or nothing. Like, I mean, he's not throwing the ball well. So I don't think it really, is much of a difference at all. So, yeah, I think it's pretty clear that A&M's investing in their guy and trying to make it work, but Marcel Reed is clearly the better option for them, and that is just the way it's going to be moving forward. I don't know how you could present an argument to the contrary at this point in time, so we'll see what he's able to do once he's fully been given the reins, but that was an excellent win over LSU that looked like it was going to be a big win for LSU early on in that game, and then, A&M came storming back once they made the quarterback change.
There was a coaching change that we'll get to in the 4 o'clock hour. A couple of notes about Miami's offense. All of that and more. We'll do that just after 4 o'clock.